fabulous.
Yes, fabulous. It's Fabulous 500, another $5 scratch game from the NLE, loaded with $500 cash prizes.
With a top prize of $25,000.
You have 10 chances to win.
Fabulous $500.
There's cash to catch with just a scratch. Fabulous. Fabulous 500.
This evening on the VC3 News Update, the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines recently appointed a new honorary consul in Istanbul, Turkey. World Pediatric Project remains committed to the children and families in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And the Regional Integration Diaspora Unit, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, and the CARICOM Youth Ambassadors are hosting the 2021 CARICOM Week of Activities. We'll have these stories and more coming up at 7 p.m. on the VC3 News Update.
Good evening and welcome to this week's edition of Round Table Talk. It's a special edition as usual. We have an all-female panel this evening in the persons of the head of the UWI Seismic Research Center, Dr. EROUSCILLA Joseph. We also have a scientist who is also based here on the ground. She's based in Montserrat, but she's in the ground working with us, Dr. Karen PASCAL, and of course our usual Head of NEMO, Director of NEMO, Ms. Michelle Forbes. Welcome, ladies, to this special edition of Round Table Talk.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Okay, so we're going to be talking about a lot of different things. The Soufriere Volcano. We're also going to be talking about your work, you guys, in your various capacities. So I'm going to start by asking Dr. Joseph first to give us an update on Soufriere and tell us also what she does as the head of the UWI Seismic Research Center.
Thank you very much, Teresa. So with respect to the current activity at La Soufriere, seismic activity remains low. This has been on a steady decline since the last explosive activity on the 22nd of April. So we're averaging on just under 10 events per day. Some days, with one or two seismic events and some days more. Ground deformation is very minimal and we're not seeing any significant deformation. Dr. Pascal is one of the ground deformation specialists that works with us. She could explain a bit more about that during the program. And we will see, when the clouds permit, you will see degassing of the plume. This is primarily sulfur dioxide. The average currently is about 480 tons per day. And this is being measured by boat on the West Coast twice a week. So we are in a kind of a steadily declining type of activity associated with a post-eruption. However, if there is new magmatic input, which there's a very small possibility of, then with fresh magma influx, we can see a change to the system. But the ongoing hazards right now are primarily associated with the deposits that are on the flanks of the volcano in relation to the risk of lahars when there's heavy rainfall and the remobilization of that on the in the valleys surrounding the volcano. So that's a quick update on the activity. And with respect to my role, well, as you mentioned before, my name is EROUSCILLA Joseph. Most people call me Pat. I have worked with the Seismic Research Center since 2002, so 19 years. I actually started off as a student, a PhD student. I did my graduate research at SEISMIC. My area of research is in fluid geochemistry. So I sampled the gas and the waters associated with volcanoes and look at the changes in chemical composition over time to look at precursory signals for magmatic input or changes in volcanic activity. My other areas of interest is health, with respect to the health hazards or health impacts of volcanic emissions. And I also provide support in a number of other monitoring operations. I do, I've done dome volume monitoring, I've done, ground deformation monitoring, and most recently in November 2019, I assumed the director position, taking over from Prof. Robertson, who many of your listeners would be familiar with. So in terms of the administrative function at SEISMIC, so I currently am in charge of the administrative running. So that's all of the day-to-day operations, coordination of activity, including, of course, the entire eruption of the La Soufriere. All of that was coordinated and managed through the Trinidad-based team, myself, and with the collaborative effort of all of the staff at SEISMIC and MVO.
Okay, thank you very much, Doc. Dr. Pascal, what do you do as a ground deformation specialist?
Yeah, that's what Dr. Joseph was saying, is that I have been working at the Montserrat Volcano Observatory for a bit more than 8 years now. And I am the person in charge of the ground deformation monitoring network, and so obviously the analysis as well of the signal. And so it would be using, for instance, instruments like GPS or like satellite imagery, or things that we call the tilt meter that measure like the change in angle on the, so obviously it's very small on the volcano. Different type of theodolite as well, which some people might have seen. For instance, it's also used in a construction to measure distances. So some people, like a lot of people, often have used this kind of instrument just by people, working on the side of the road. So we use all these different kind of instruments to measure the deformation of the volcano, and the deformation of the volcano give us an idea of what's happening in the magmatic system, meaning like the pressurization of the magmatic system, and in particular if the magma is moving. And obviously what we are interested in is seeing if the magma is moving towards the surface, because obviously it's going to affect people around. So that's what I'm working on at MVO and also here with in collaboration with Dr. MICHELE, who's based at the SEISMIC Research Center.
Okay, so you've been on the ground how long, and what have been your findings so far?
So I have arrived just 2 weeks ago, and we are processing the GPS data from St. Vincent every day anyway. And as Dr. Joseph was saying, there hasn't been any significant deformation since just after the eruption, basically, the explosions. So since end of April. So that would mean that there hasn't been any, there hasn't been pressurization of the system. And so that's probably that there hasn't been any magma movement.
Okay. Michelle Forbes, from a NEMO standpoint, what has been happening?
In terms of the volcano, we continue to coordinate with the SEISMIC Research Center on a daily basis what's happening at the volcano. We also have on the ground an engineer, the instrumentation specialist from the center, Mr. Lynch, and also an assistant engineer from Montserrat, and they work along with our local counterparts, our senior seismic technician, our junior technician, and this last few weeks have been really focused on getting the instruments back up in terms of ensuring that we can get signals into the Belmont Observatory and also to Trinidad so that they can actually continue to do the analysis. All during the eruption, we have been in constant contact, daily contact with Dr. Joseph, with Pat, with Richie, in terms of what was happening, what they were seeing, and what it means, implications for the civil authorities, if you want to put it that way, what actions that we should be taking from the national level. So it has been a constant collaboration over the last few months. We have worked well with the SRC, and we continue to take the advice and look forward, because it's important for us to look forward to see how we're going to establish our and basically boost our unit going forward, because it means now that Soufriere is a volcano that has to be monitored 24 hours locally, and hence we are now moving towards that, building that capacity in country and in collaboration with the Seismic Research Center. So it has been still busy. One of the concerns, of course, we have coming out from the eruptions, with the last one being on the 22nd, is the presence, we'll have the presence of lahars with us for some time. And lahars are really the rain, when the rain mixes with the ash and all the volcanic materials coming down the slopes, coming through the gullies, and they pick up the rocks and everything with it, and it can be very destructive, and that can move anything within its path. So from the explosive eruptions, our concern, of course, where we sit at that NEMO, going forward, is that we will have lahars with us for some time until all of that material has come down. And it may take a while, because even though we would have had eruption prior to that in 1979, we see that when we have flooding, heavy rainfall coming down from the Rabica, material come down. It means that a lot of material is still in the mountains and will be in the mountains for some time, and on the flanks of the volcano to come down into the gullies and into the valleys. So that's one of our greatest threats going forward.
We'll talk some about the lahar situation, but you mentioned the fact that Soufriere would need to be monitored 24/7. What are some of the things that you need to put in place to ensure that this happens?
Well, the ongoing indication.
What kind of capacity?
Personnel, definitely personnel. We are looking to hire our own resident geophysicists, if you want to put it, geoscientists to head the unit, an engineer also, a geologist, and we have our technicians going forward. We are looking to also turn the Belmont Observatory into a research center in a kind of way, because it is ripe. St. Vincent now is ripe for research. Soufriere and what it has done over the last few months, it's an area now that's ripe for research for both the SRC and their team, and for the scientists and budding scientists. And we hope that we'll have a few local scientists who will be, such inclined to actually look towards working in that field. So you have the human capacity. We need to have that on the ground to be able to monitor 24 hours, definitely.
Okay, and probably later on I'll ask both Dr. Joseph and Dr. Pascal, what would they say to encourage maybe young women to get involved in this field? We'll be back. We'll take our first break, and we'll be back in just a moment.
The Super 6 jackpot for Friday, July night is $220,000. Super 6, more jackpot money.
More jackpot money, more reasons to play this game. More money for way. Super 6, a bigger jackpot game.
On Friday, July 9th, there'll be thousands of dollars to be won. A lotto jackpot of $62,000. A new home, car, or that college education.
Lotto, you have to be in it to win it.
Next lotto jackpot, $62,000.
This evening on the VC3 News Update, the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines recently appointed a new honorary consul in Istanbul, Turkey. World Pediatric Project remains committed to the children and families in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And the Regional Integration Diaspora Unit, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, and the CARICOM Youth Ambassadors are hosting the 2021 CARICOM Week of Activities. We'll have these stories and more coming up at 7 p.m. on the VC3 News Update.
Welcome back, and we were talking in the first half about LAHAS. Dr. Joseph, tell us a little bit more about LAHAS and explain to us whether or not or why we didn't appear to have a similar problem after the 1979 eruption. LAHAS are now going to be a very significant part of the daily lives, especially of people north of the Dry River. Why did this not happen after the 1979 eruption?
So the 1979 eruption started with an explosive activity and ended with a dome. So there wasn't the volume of material that was deposited in from that explosion was not of a similar magnitude as the amount of material that was deposited from this eruption. In addition to which, there wasn't so this eruption started with so there was a dome present, the 1979 dome, then there was a new dome, the 2021 dome, and then we also had the excavation of the crater floor. So all of that material, so you had 3 sets of material that was erupted by the explosive phase. So you had all of that volume of material now being deposited on the flanks of the volcano. Some of it already, a huge bulk of it have already gone out to sea, but there's still a significant amount that is on the flanks, in the valleys, and in the crater itself as well, built up into the crater floor. So that volume of material is what is the challenge now. And until the vegetation has been reestablished to stabilize that material on the flanks of the volcano as well as in the valleys and so on, then that material will be loose, fairly loose. And when there is rainfall, there will be continually remobilization of that material in the valleys. Not only that, this is this is rocks and abrasive, debris, tree trunks and all sorts of things, and it will continue to excavate the channels. There's a trespassing. Yes, there's and so it will not only dig into the material that's been deposited on the flanks, but it will actually dig into the deeper down structure of the volcano itself, the pre-existing structure. So all of that is a significant amount of material that will continue to be moved and eroded with the with rainfall until, as I said, vegetation is reestablished on the volcano.
Okay. We spoke earlier about training and building of capacity and so on, and I'm told that Dr. Karen has already started this process.
Well, it
yes,
started.
Sorry.
It actually started before that. We had volunteers from the time we had started to have the effusive eruption last year. We had volunteers coming forward. We have persons in St. Vincent and the Grenadines who have their first degree in geology, geophysics. So several persons came forward, and out of that group, we have one young lady, Lianka Henry, who was actually understudying TISI when he was here to collect the gases. So in his absence, Lianka actually is the one who has been going out to the Coast Guard, and the Coast Guard has really been supporting us since these events. So twice a week, we go to the Traverse and actually do the gas sampling with Lianka, and Karen is also going out with her, teaching her, a few things too. So that's our way of building the capacity locally, so that we already have a local scientist who has actually taken on that role.
And Karen, how has that been going so far?
Yeah, very good. Well, I mean, Lianka has been doing that for quite a while now, so I don't think she really needs me to teach her so much. Besides, so gas is not my specialty, so it would be more TC. But she's doing both the collection of data and also the processing. I mean, obviously, the final numbers always come from TC, who's the responsible for it at the moment. But yeah, she's doing very well, and so the idea is also to try to see if she's interested in learning of other subjects. So for me, it would be like showing her, for instance, how to process, how to collect the data for GPS. So we can do, for instance, some campaign, what we call campaign. So it's like a short time instead of having a continuous station, we just have like a temporary station basically, and so like showing her how to set up the station, how to collect the data, and also how to do the processing, such that she learns as much as possible from us basically. And I mean, she also, she's also at the observatory when people are in the field, and to make sure that they are safe. And she knows very well how to deal with the radio communication, and also like she learned how to recognize different types of earthquakes. So she definitely learned a lot, and she's very eager to learn, which is really really nice to see.
Okay, Dr. Joseph, differentiate for us difference between lahars and pyroclastic flows, please, once again.
So pyroclastic flow is a dense body of its gas. It's a fast moving current of hot gas mixed with ash. And as this is erupted from the volcano, it's so dense that it flows down the flanks and in the valleys of the volcano. So this is very hot, hundreds of degrees Celsius. So it really is a channel of hot gas that can burn, everything that it comes in contact with. And the lahars, however, it's the deposits that's on the volcano that's already been erupted. Some of it may still be warm, that would be incorporated as a mud flow, and will also be primarily channeled in valleys and so on, the typical areas where rivers, would flow. So that's the big difference between the pyroclastic flow and the lahars. Of course, pyroclastic flows are only associated when a volcano is in an explosive phase. These and it doesn't happen with every eruption. Because as most people will remember, in the early days of the explosive activity, the plume heights were huge. Because of that buildup of pressure, the plume rose to over 10 plus kilometers in height. So the volume of the material that was taken up then was actually ejected into the upper atmosphere. Whereas later on in eruption, it changed from that type of what we call Plinian or subplinian type style of eruptions to what we call Vulcanian style, which is lower, and it will reach within a few kilometers above the volcano and then collapse. And when it collapses on itself, that's when it flows along the valleys, generating the PDCs, the pyroclastic density currents. So it's really associated with explosions, whereas the lahars are what's left over by this type of by the eruptive products being incorporated into the rainfall and water on the flanks of the volcano. What can happen is that while the material is still hot, because you still have hot deposits, as people see sometimes when there's rainfall, you would notice in some of the valleys there's steaming, and people have videotaped this and many occasions and shared it on social media, because some of these deposits are still hot. So sometimes the mud flows will be a bit warm because it's still incorporating still warm material that's on the volcano.
What kind of signals do you get when there is a lahar?
So a lahar is, how do we describe the shape of that signal? It has to do with the shape and the frequency of the signal. So I don't have a diagram here or a representation of what a lahar signal would look like, but it's very different from an explosion or a pyroclastic density current. We can detect the PDCs are often by sight, because not every, as I said before, not every explosion will generate a PDC. So we look for the size of the explosion, and then we observe the PDC happening in the valleys, or from going out physically and observing the deposits to see where flows had taken place. So it really is a difference in the frequency, the amplitude, and the duration of the signals.
Okay, so is there a way of getting the signal beforehand so that people can be forewarned?
So not for a lahar. What can happen though is that because we know the state of the activity now with respect to the amount of deposits that's on the volcano, and that whenever there's rainfall, especially heavy rainfall, that this material is likely to be washed, incorporated into the rainfall and washed away. It means that we have to use the weather as a kind of a precursory, in preparation for knowing that if it's going to be a rainy day, that if you are close to river valleys, that you be aware of this, particularly river valleys where you've seen flows already come down, that you avoid these areas, especially during rainy periods, and stick to higher ground, or just do not venture out into these areas, because you can become marooned and stuck out there in these mud flows, and they can be very powerful, and of course they can last for a while, as long as the rain continues to fall. So what happens in other places, we do detect with the current network on the volcano, we do detect the signals, but we can't see which valleys, we cannot give a forewarning as to which valleys they're occurring in. You'd have to have a very different type of network in order to do that. And that would also have to include things like cameras and sirens, and a lot of infrastructure to be able to have a lahar monitoring and warning system.
Okay, thank you. When we come back, we will talk a little bit of preparing for a lahar, and also the relation between rainfall or bad weather and seismic activity. Back in just a moment.
This evening on the VC3 News Update, the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines recently appointed a new honorary consul in Istanbul, Turkey. World Pediatric Project remains committed to the children and families in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And the Regional Integration Diaspora Unit, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, and the CARICOM Youth Ambassadors are hosting the 2021 CARICOM Week of Activities. We'll have these stories and more coming up at 7 p.m. on the VC3 News Update.
More jackpot money, more reasons to play this game. More money for way. Super 6 a bigger jackpot game.
The Super 6 jackpot for Friday, July 9th is $220,000. Super 6, more jackpots money.
Hey! More jackpot money, more reasons to play this game. More money for way. Super 6 a bigger jackpot game.
On Friday, July 9th, there'll be thousands of dollars to be won. A lotto jackpot of $62,000. A new home, car, or that college education.
Lotto, you have to be in it to win it.
Next lotto jackpot, $62,000.
Welcome back. Prior to the last eruption in April, the previous eruption was actually held 42 years ago. Are we seeing a pattern here, Dr. Pat? Is there a pattern in terms of the frequency that we should now expect Soufriere to erupt?
So there's no pattern per se. However, we have observed that the periods between eruptions have been getting shorter. And this is actually not just the case for La Soufriere alone, but we also have seen it recently with Kikimjani. But just to say that there is no established pattern. However, La Soufriere St. Vincent is one of the more historical volcanoes that have shown more recent activity in the future within the region. So there could be a number of reasons why this may be the case. It could be the type of system, in that there is a clear conduit that it seems that through the plumbing system is one where magma can easily come through with very little precursory warning, such as what happened in December when the extrusion started with very little seismicity. And this is actually something to be concerned about, and which is why a monitoring system in place is very important, plus the hazard awareness and education of the public. And of course, the preparations that the authority, and the whole thing about listening to the official sources of information and preparing, building in safe areas, understanding the risks and the hazards associated with volcanoes, and knowing how to respond. So going back to your question, so while there hasn't actually been a cyclical pattern or something that's very mathematical, there does seem to be a noticeable trend towards a shortening between the intervals of eruptive episodes. La Soufriere. Don't know if this will continue to happen in the future, but it is something that we will be paying, we have to pay close attention to.
Is there any relationship with weather and seismic activity? Because I seem to have noticed within, especially with the recent hurricane, that people have been close to the volcano, have been complaining about what they think is some seeming seismic activity. Is there any relationship at all?
So there is no relationship between the weather and seismic activity per se. However, rain, as we were speaking about lahars and other related hazards associated with the volcanoes and signals that you may see, the rainfall, remember we're dealing with two things. One, the rainfall incorporating the lahars, which generates seismic signals. It's not that it's related to the seismic activity generated by the volcano. It's the lahar itself is detected by a signal, right? That's detected on our seismic network, right? So that's one. The second thing is that water can come in contact with hot material that is in the crater currently and can generate a burst of steam, what we call phreatic activity. And this phreatic activity can also may also be detected by the seismic network as a seismic signal. But again, it is not related to volcanic earthquakes, a pure volcanic signal or seismic signal. I hope I explain that properly in a way that people could understand the difference.
So there's a difference between a seismic signal and seismic activity. Basically, that's what we're saying.
That is the short, long and short of it.
Okay, and I've also been hearing about odor, the smell of sulfur recently.
Yes, and that is not surprising because, as we just said, that the deposits in that's on the volcano is made of volcanic rock. The volcanic rock has sulfur content in it because the gas that's being emitted is incorporated into the rocks, right? So when there is rainfall and there's hot material, there's steaming happening. And as the steaming happening, the smell of the gas, the sulfur, is released into the air. So you get that smell.
How does Soufriere look now? Have you been able to view it?
So Dr. Pascal actually has seen it up close, closer than myself. I've seen it in picture. Well, I've seen it recently in pictures. I've been up there twice before the eruption, but Dr. Pascal was here when the helicopter was available 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And she did some surveys and observations on the helicopter to view the crater up there in person.
Yeah, so unfortunately I haven't seen I've never been to St. Vincent before and didn't see so like for me it's all new here, but now it looks like most all of the domes, as Dr. Joseph was saying earlier, have disappeared, and there is a big crater which I think is deeper than the previous crater floor of before. So the crater which existed and where the 1979 dome was upon is now you have within this crater you have another deeper crater. And you also have several vents where you have a lot of gas getting out from, and steam and gas getting out from. And so we still see it actually like from Belmont, from Chateau Bel Air, you can see the gas getting out. And obviously it's covered in ash. You have some areas where you have some on the side of the crater, where you have some fumaroles as well, so more gas getting out. I don't know if your audience have been a chance to look at the SRC Facebook page, for instance, but there are, I think we have posted picture there, so it will be much better than my description. But yeah, I hope it answers your question. It's good enough. It's all gray. Basically very gray, while I think it was like a very green area before, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think people will miss seeing the dome, that 1979 dome, and all of the green, the greenery and lush valleys, surfaces that used to cover the volcano. That is how I always picture it. That's what I've accustomed with, the coolness of yes, it's very windy, but there's no vegetation to buffer the winds and the weather up there. So it's a very open and sparse environment at the summit. As Dr. Pascal said, very, very gray because of the deposits and the amount of ash.
Yeah.
And that, significantly missing 1979 dome.
And I think the outside rim of the crater has remained the same though. So the actual outside rim is the same, but it's within this outside rim that a lot have changed. Thank you. Always better to see a figure.
Dr. Joseph, what do you say to people who express concern when there's a little bit of weather in the area and they seem to think that something is happening in respect of the volcano? I noticed that there's been a lot of that creeping up in social media relative to that concern.
So I would advise that just as was done during the entire course of the eruption and even before that, you stay, you look to the official sources of information, NEMO and SRC, to keep updates on what is happening at the volcano, especially if you are concerned. You need to check the official sources of information, because there are fake news, as you pointed out, and people share things that are unexplained. They may misinterpret things and share it, and this is how unfortunately panic spreads. So we know that with rainfall, the primary risk is lahars. Other than that, you know how to respond to lahars. Keep away from low-lying areas, stay away from river channels and valleys. Do not try to cross them. These are some of the immediate things. So with respect to the weather, this is the best advice I could give. And of course, you have your Met forecast available every day, so you kind of pay attention to the advisories there.
Okay, when we come back, we're going to look at the human aspect of it. How do we prepare? What people need to know about lahars and how to be safe. Back in just a moment.
More reasons to play this game. More money for way. Super 6 a bigger jackpot game.
The Super 6 jackpot for Friday, July 9th is $220,000. Super 6, more jackpot money.
Hey! More jackpot money. More reasons to play this game. More money for way. Super 6 a bigger jackpot game.
This evening on the VC3 News Update, the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines recently appointed a new honorary consul in Istanbul, Turkey. World Pediatric Project remains committed to the children and families in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And the Regional Integration Diaspora Unit, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, and the CARICOM Youth Ambassadors are hosting the 2021 CARICOM Week of Activities. We'll have these stories and more coming up at 7 p.m. on the VC3 News Update.
On Friday, July 9th, there'll be thousands of dollars to be won. A lotto jackpot of $62,000. A new home, car, or that college education.
Lotto, you have to be in it to win it.
Next lotto jackpot, $62,000.
Welcome back. Michelle, maybe we could start off with you in this segment and tell us what are some of the things that you need to tell people who live in the area, how to be safe, the need to still stay away from those red zone areas, and why.
Well, definitely the volcano itself, the summit of the volcano will be off limits for some time. Even the access to the volcano now you really can't, it's not easy to get to the volcano. I think our team tried today, and there's a lot of debris and trees in the path because we are trying to get onto the summit to finish up that station. Now, during the eruption, tons of material would have come down, tons of hot material, and it means that a lot of this hot material is buried under material upon material. On Sunday, we traverse on the leeward side, going up to Fancy via boat, and you can still see the steaming in the valleys, which means that there's hot material, hot deposits under deep under the surface. So it's extremely dangerous for persons who will want to try and venture into those areas. So we're talking about past Richmond going down, and you can actually see some of the steaming. Now you have to really see it to understand the type of deposits and the amount of deposits that has been thrown out from the volcano. I had the opportunity to go up in a helicopter, mainly on the leeward coast, and in those gullies we were looking at between 50 and 80 feet of material still in those gullies to come down. Luckily though, that there are no communities, built up communities on that side of the island, but we do have on the east side, where we have a lot of deposit on the flanks of the volcano in that case, but on the leeward side is deep in the gullies we have quite a bit of deposit. So these areas are generally still unsafe. You may be walking and think that you're walking on solid ground, and then the material underneath is hot, and if your feet get down there, then it can harm you. On the windward side in particular of the island, this is our greatest concern in terms of the lahars. Lahars, yes, will go down on the western flanks, on the western coast, but as I said, there are no communities, built up communities there, but above the Rabaca, that is where they can be quite deadly. We have seen now, after every rainfall event we have in the lahars, from Rabaca northwards, especially in Sandy Bay, and we have to recognize that going forward, some of these communities in these where the areas on the lahars and the pyroclastic flows have come down, you may not be able to rebuild there. And I think we need to be getting that now into our heads, that it cannot be business as usual, just building where you think it is dry, because that's why they're called dry rivers. We have several dry rivers above North Rabaca. In Fancy you have dry river. So these rivers tend to expand when they're seasonal, and they tend to expand a bit when we have after an eruption. So you can see how wide these river valleys are. You look across by London there, even at Pepper Village, you can see the destruction, and across those areas, near those areas, even the Cairo and the Cairo rivers, you can see the type of material that can come down there, and the big stones. So it means going forward that these communities, so at some point our alert level will go down because our activities continue to decrease, but it cannot be business as usual going back to the communities. The communities now have to be prepared to be able to survive on its own for a period of time, because at some point each community is going to get cut off. When there's heavy rainfall, you're going to get all the rivers coming down from Noel going upwards. Even at Overland we have a river there too, I can't remember the name, but it means that each community is going to be isolated. Sandy Bay is going to be cut off from Owe is going to be cut off from Fancy. And we saw that last week during the passage of Hurricane Elsa. We couldn't get into Fancy right away. Mm-hmm. But luckily by Sunday afternoon, persons were able to get in. So much so that's why we had to go up via the sea. So this is going to happen for a long time. Every time there's heavy rainfall, this is going to happen. We have to ensure that persons understand the part that these lahars can come down, and if you continue to live and build in these areas, you can be swept away. We came through an eruption with no loss of life. We do not want going into the hurricane season when there's heavy rainfall that people reoccupy these areas and be swept away. So they have to understand the risk now, the increased risk of the flooding and the lahars coming down these rivers, that before to them it was dry. Nothing much happened. Yes, we had rainfall, we had flooding in some part of the rivers, but not over by me. But you realize now that whole area is quite wide, and you realize the amount of material that has come down there, which basically said to you that you were living in the river. So we have to understand the risk now and what we are dealing with going forward. And it's extremely dangerous, because the materials come down, they pick up speed as they come along, they pick up stones as they come along, and they can bulldoze everything. And you think you can't outrun a flood or lahar. We saw last week, we had a tropical wave passing through, and our vehicles trying to, of course, got stuck. We saw it on social media. And, this is extremely dangerous, because there's a lot of soft material coming down. So when you think your tires are going on solid ground, it's not. It's a sandy type of material, and you try to cross it, and your wheels are going to just dig deeper into the silt. So it's really extremely dangerous trying to cross, and extremely dangerous to be in those areas, even sightseeing or trying to see what is happening. And that's one thing I want to guard people against. We have to see a lot of people going into the areas, especially when it's raining, to sightsee. it's a dangerous practice, because where you think...
Is it still off limits? So can people just go into the area now at this time?
It's still restricted, but we have had quite a few persons moving back. You know, people are not comfortable living with relatives and friends, or not wanting to be in the shelters. So we have seen an increased number of persons going back as the activities have decreased. So persons are still going back, even though we have not given the official okay to go back north of the Rabaca.
Are they going back to these
Not in, I haven't seen any in the drivers itself, but generally into the communities. You have a lot of persons into the communities. I think Fancy is the one that maybe had less, but a few persons, they were anxious to see their homes, what had happened during the passage of Hurricane Elsa, so they did go up on Sunday to really see what was happening. But Sandy Bay and all, we definitely have large populations have moved back.
Okay, so for those particular areas, we're going to need alternatives. Alternative housing. Alternative housing,
because obviously some cannot rebuild there. So I know that's something that as a government is looking at. I wouldn't be able to give full details on that. But alternative housing, where we're going to build, and ensuring that areas that we want to rebuild are not going to be impacted in the next eruption by the same lahars and pyroclastic flow. So we have to be guided by the science, Dr. Joseph and her team, in that regard. Where we would have had lahars before, it means also that we have to update the lahar maps, and that's a discussion I've been having with Dr. Joseph for the last week or two, updating those lahar maps to show the extent of where these flows can go, so that we are not as we go looking towards a redevelopment and rebuilding and recovery planning, that we do not make the same mistakes like yesterday, that we actually now plan ahead.
So these maps will entail some sort of demarcation.
Yes,
certain.
Yes, definitely some areas that should not be reoccupied.
Very interesting. Dr. Joseph, the way forward?
Yeah. So going forward, there's quite a lot to do. So SRC, we continue to look at the eruptive products. We continue to investigate the processes following the eruption to learn more about what happened, to inform of future understanding of the system, and to provide us with information for future activity at the volcano. And not just this volcano, but other volcanoes in the region and possibly the world. So we do that not only by ourselves, but in collaboration with regional and international scientists. So we can continue to investigate the volcanic system. We continue to work with NEMO to keep the monitoring system up to standard, that we can detect unusual activity and continue to report on the ongoing activity of the volcano. We continue to work with local authorities, NEMO and SMU, to, as we said before, train and build local capacity. We are learning ourselves from our handling of the eruption and trying to better, things that could be improved moving forward. There is activities like lahar maps and revisions of the hazard maps going to take place. And as Ms. Forbes indicated, one of the things is to work alongside NEMO to help identify these areas that will be unsafe for reoccupation in the near future, and as well as in the long-term future, because of the possibility of future eruptions impacting these same areas. So you don't want to rebuild in the same areas that could be impacted by a future explosion or eruption, because you're going to have continually an exposed, you're going to lose, first of all, the economic impacts, as well as loss of life and property and people's livelihoods and so on. So you want to reduce the impact on the population. So these are some of the future, and of course, the capacity building of the Belmont Observatory itself to be, as Ms. Forbes indicated, a center that can be a center for science, not just for regional scientists, but for international scientists who work with us. to help understand, better understand the volcano here, our region, help with preparedness and for future eruptions. So I'm not sure, Karen, if there's anything you'd like to add?
No, I think you cover basically everything that we are going to say. For Montserrat, we might also be interested in building more bridges, between the future scientists who will be based here and the volcano observatory there as well, since obviously Montserrat, as you know, the observatory has a big experience, and actually we've participated a lot to the monitoring here. But it's also the population in Montserrat who has an experience of this eruption like this, and it could be maybe interesting to build the more connections between the two countries, and for instance, children in Montserrat or children in St. Vincent to learn from each other and to share this. Maybe even with the French, who knows, since I'm also like a French.
And Michelle?
I think I'm going forward.
I know you're mopping up in the aftermath of the hurricane as well, so where to?
Well, in terms of the focusing on the volcanic hazard, I think the key for us is strengthening our monitoring network, which we are doing. I think at the end of the day, we'll have one of the better monitoring networks, better than you, Karen, in the region, because this has provided an opportunity to look at the different technologies also and really implement the technology. Because what there's some equipment that we have installed, we would not even be able to access them if they go down. Let's, for example, say Wallaby. Because look at the deep gully that has come through Richmond. We will not be able to get over to Wallaby for some time. So we definitely have to look at the technology going forward and building and strengthening our network so that Soufriere has always been an active volcano, so that the slightest change we can detect and see what is happening. So that's important. And of course, St. Vincent is ripe for research. We have to learn from this event, even from what happened from the evacuation right down, from the science to the evacuation, the human part of it. We have to learn from these events so that we can actually share that knowledge going forward, and for the next generation to know that we are living with this volcano. We have to plan for it. We have to look at the science, we have to look at the human science and social part of it, and knowing that the volcano is going to present different risks. It's going to present also some positives in terms of our agricultural growth, but of course it has its destructive capabilities. But to continue to build that whole network, build a whole research capacity for St. Vincent and the Grenadines and for the region, and really look at that whole citizen science part of it, communicating that risk to the public.
Well, thank you very much, ladies. Doctors Pascal and Joseph and Michelle Forbes of NEMO. Thank you for a very interesting and enlightening discussion. That's our program for today. Join us again next week, Wednesday, for another edition of Roundtable Talk. Good evening.
This evening on the VC3 News Update, the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines recently appointed a new honorary consul in Istanbul, Turkey. World Pediatric Project remains committed to the children and families in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And the Regional Integration Diaspora Unit, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, and the CARICOM Youth Ambassadors are hosting the 2021 CARICOM Week of Activities. We'll have these stories and more coming up at 7 p.m. on the VC3 News Update.
More jackpot money, more reasons to play this game. More money for way, Super 6 a bigger jackpot game.
The Super 6 jackpot for Friday, July 9th is $220,000. Super 6, more jackpots money.
More jackpot money, more reasons to play this game. More money for way, Super 6 a bigger jackpot game.
On Friday, July 9th, there'll be thousands of dollars to be won. A lotto jackpot of $62,000. A new home, car, or that college education.
Lotto, you have to be in it to win it.
Next lotto jackpot, $62,000.